Mercedes just got exposed, and the FIA shut it down immediately. A hidden engine trick, worth up to 2/10 in qualifying, gone overnight. A last-second power surge, perfectly timed at the finish line, now completely banned. And here's what makes this even bigger. It wasn't illegal. It was genius. Right on the edge of the rules, until the moment it wasn't. Because just days before Miami, the FIA stepped in and erased it completely, after Mercedes used it to dominate the opening races. This isn't just a technical detail. This is the kind of advantage that wins pole positions, controls races, and decides championships. And now? It doesn't exist anymore. Which means the fastest team on the grid just lost one of their most powerful weapons, right when everyone finally understood what they were doing. It didn't look like cheating. That's the first thing you need to understand. Because what Mercedes was doing wasn't breaking the rules. It was bending them perfectly. And that's why it worked. Deep inside the car's energy system, there's a constant cycle. Store energy, release energy, repeat. Every team does it. Every lap depends on it. But Mercedes found a way to manipulate one very specific moment in that cycle. The end of the lap. Right before the car crosses the finish line, when the stopwatch is still running, but about to stop. That exact instant. Instead of gradually reducing power like most teams, Mercedes kept everything at maximum. Full deployment. Right to the very edge. And then, in the final fraction of a second, they triggered a rapid recharge cycle. A sudden spike. A burst of extra power that hit at the exact moment the lap time was recorded. Think about that. Not more power across the whole lap. Just more power, exactly when it matters most. It's like taking an exam where your score is locked the second you submit, and somehow, you find a way to answer one extra question at the last possible moment. That's what they were doing. And the gain? Up to 1 or 2/10 of a second, in just a few meters. That's massive. In Formula 1, that's the gap between pole position and starting second. And starting second changes everything. But here's what makes this even more fascinating. Other teams knew something was happening. They could see the lap times. They could see where Mercedes was gaining. But replicating it was another story. Because this wasn't just about pressing a button. It required perfect timing, perfect software control, perfect understanding of how energy flows through the system. And Mercedes had all of that. Years of development, simulation, precision. They didn't just discover the trick. They mastered it. And for 3 races, it worked flawlessly, quietly, efficiently, decisively, until Miami. Because once the FIA fully understood what was happening, the reaction was immediate. No long debate. No gradual adjustment. Just one clear decision. Ban it. Completely. No more last-second surge. No more hidden advantage at the line. And suddenly, something that helped define Mercedes' dominance disappears overnight. But here's the part most people still don't see. This wasn't just a clever trick. It was part of a bigger system. A system that connected qualifying performance with energy management, with overall car behavior. Remove one piece, and the rest starts to shift. And that's exactly what Miami is about to expose. But that's only half the story. Because this trick didn't exist in isolation. It was connected to everything else Mercedes was doing. That final burst of power at the end of the lap? It only worked because of how they managed energy during the entire lap. Every corner, every braking zone, every tiny lift of the throttle. All of it was carefully calculated to arrive at that final moment with just the right amount of energy. Not too much. Not too little. Exactly enough to trigger that last surge. Now imagine removing that final piece. That last burst, gone. Suddenly, the entire rhythm of the lap breaks. Because now, all that energy you were saving has nowhere to go. All that precision loses its purpose. And the driver feels it immediately. The lap no longer builds towards something. It just ends. And that changes how you drive. Because before, you could manage the lap knowing you had one final push. Now, you have to extract everything earlier. Which means pushing harder in the middle sectors. Taking more risks before the final straight. And that opens the door to mistakes. Small ones. Tiny corrections. But enough to lose time. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Because the FIA didn't just ban the trick. They also reduced how much energy drivers can recover during a lap. Which means even if Mercedes tried to adapt, they now have less total energy to work with. Less flexibility. Less margin. It's like being told not only that you can't sprint at the finish line, but also that you have less stamina for the entire race. Everything becomes tighter. More restrictive. And for a system that depended on perfect timing, that's a huge problem. But here's the key detail. Mercedes built their car around this philosophy. around controlling energy better than anyone else, around squeezing performance from moments others ignored. So when you remove that final moment, you don't just lose a trick, you lose an entire way of operating. And that's why this hits harder than it seems. Because other teams? They weren't as dependent on it. They lose less. They adapt faster. They move on. Mercedes has to rethink everything. And just as they start doing that, another change quietly makes the situation even worse. Not by removing something, but by changing how the car behaves underneath them. And this is where the real instability begins. And this is where everything starts to unravel from the inside. Because up to this point, we've been talking about losing an advantage, losing a trick, losing performance. But now, Mercedes loses something much harder to measure. They lose understanding. Because there's a system in the car that controls how energy is handled when the driver slows down. And when that system reaches its limit, the car reacts. Not like normal braking. Something different. Drivers described it as the car holding itself back. Almost like an invisible hand briefly pulling it down. That system is called superclipping. And before Miami, it had a flaw. An inconsistency. Sometimes it felt strong. Sometimes weaker. Sometimes unpredictable. And that unpredictability? That's exactly where Mercedes found their edge. They didn't fight it. They learned it. They mapped it. They knew exactly when it would happen, and how to use it. It became part of their rhythm. Part of how they entered corners. Part of how they balanced the car. But Miami changes that. Completely. The FIA removes the inconsistency. They align the system so it behaves the same way, every single time. Smooth. Predictable. Controlled. And again, it sounds like an improvement. But here's the reality. When something unpredictable becomes predictable, everyone resets. Because the advantage was never the system itself. The advantage was understanding it better than anyone else. Mercedes had built that understanding over time. Through simulation. Through experience. Through thousands of laps of feedback. Now, that knowledge becomes useless. It's like learning how to play a game, and then suddenly the rules change. You're not worse. But you're no longer ahead. And in Formula One, that's everything. But it goes deeper than that. Because drivers don't just rely on data. They rely on feeling. On instinct. On trust. They know how the car should react, before it even does. And when that reaction changes, even slightly, that trust disappears. Not completely, but enough to hesitate. A fraction earlier on the brakes. A fraction later on the throttle. A fraction more cautious on entry. And those fractions, they stack. Corner after corner. Lap after lap. Until suddenly, the lap time is gone. And here's the part that makes this even more brutal. This kind of loss doesn't show up immediately. It doesn't look dramatic. There's no obvious mistake. No visible failure. Just small differences. That quietly add up. And while Mercedes is trying to rebuild that feeling, their rivals don't have to unlearn anything. They simply adapt. Faster. Cleaner. With less to lose. And now, everything connects. The trick is gone. The energy is reduced. The behavior is changed. 3 different pillars, all removed or rewritten. At the same time. And when that happens, you're not just losing speed. You're losing identity. The car Mercedes built no longer behaves the way it was designed to. And when that identity breaks, so does the advantage. But just when it feels like Mercedes has already taken the full hit, there's one more layer. A bigger one. Because this isn't just about what they lost. It's about what others are about to gain. And that might be the most important shift of all. And this is where the story flips completely. Because up to now, everything has been about what Mercedes lost. The trick. The timing. The control. The feeling. But Formula One doesn't work in isolation. Every time one team loses something, someone else gains. And in this case, that gain could be massive. Because while Mercedes built their advantage around precision, around squeezing every last detail from the system, other teams took a different path. Ferrari, for example. They didn't rely on that last-second surge. They didn't build their lap around a final burst. Their performance came from something simpler, something more stable. Consistency. Strong baseline pace. Clean energy usage across the entire lap. So when the FIA removes that final trick, Ferrari doesn't fall back. They stay exactly where they were. But Mercedes? They drop. And that's how the gap closes, instantly. But it doesn't stop there. Because there's another mechanism in play. Something that could accelerate this shift even further. A development system designed to help teams that are behind catch up during the season. And right now, Ferrari is one of the teams that benefits from it. Which means while Mercedes is adapting, Ferrari could be improving. At the same time, think about that balance. One team losing performance, another team gaining it. Not over months, not over upgrades, but within the same window of races. That's not a small shift. That's a potential turning point. And inside the paddock, people already feel it. There's a growing sense that Miami isn't just another race. It's the start of something new. A different competitive order. A reset. Even Mercedes knows it. Because when a team like that starts talking about losing dominance, it's not speculation. It's awareness. They understand exactly what these changes mean. Not just individually, but combined. And that's the key. Because none of these changes alone would be enough. Not the ban. Not the energy reduction. Not the system rewrite. But together, they stack. They overlap. They compound. And when they do, the effect becomes impossible to ignore. Suddenly, the car that felt untouchable feels vulnerable. Suddenly, the margins disappear. Suddenly, the fight returns. And now, everything comes down to one moment. Miami. The first real test. The first time we see this new version of Formula One in action. Because this is where the theory ends, and reality begins. If Mercedes still dominates, then maybe their advantage was bigger than all of this. But if they don't, if Ferrari fights for pole, if Red Bull is right there, then we're not watching an adjustment. We're watching a shift. A shift that started quietly, with one trick being exposed, and ended with the entire balance of power changing. And the real question now is simple. Did the FIA just remove an advantage? Or did they change the championship? Because whatever happens in Miami, we're about to find out who this sport really favors now.